I personally am not a professional missionary. I don't belong to a religious community that deals with missionary work or crossing cultures, like Jesuits, Franciscans, and Maryknoll, of course, in the United States, one of the very best. And so many of these other religious orders that have that very special branch and well-prepared people for it, understanding the difference in cultures and moving in. I am a diocesan priest, in the early 60s. The diocesan bishops were asked to help out because there were many dioceses being formed here in Latin America. And they had a lot of people, they had a lot of land, but they didn't have any personnel. And so the bishops here asked for help from the diocesan bishops at home. And many of them responded. And one that responded from here was our own bishop, a very pastoral somebody. The bishop would ask, is a fellow named Angelico Melotto, who was an Italian Franciscan of the missionary part of their order, and had been sent to with his group of people to China. And after just a little bit of preparation, and basically what they got to learn the language, the communists were moving in, taking over, and so they all had to leave. And his whole kit and caboodle was sent here to Guatemala. Well, Angelico Melotto then started to get after the American bishops to help out because he was named bishop of this diocese early in his stay, 1957, as this diocese was being formed. And so our diocese was formed in 1957, and our bishop there, Alphonse Schladweiler, was also was the first bishop of the diocese, and so he said, yeah, I will respond. So there was a priest who had been talking to him about getting involved in this and wanted to come. Bishop Schladweiler wanted to have a priest to accompany him, another foreigner, another American, for 5 years. And then after that, the one that was accompanying would come home and a new one would come down and take your place. So he said, after the priest that was ready to come, was preparing and coming down and looking over things a little bit, and he immediately said, the bishop sent out a letter asking for volunteers. Well, I was ordained in 1960, and I was teaching in the Central Catholic High School out in western Minnesota in the town of Marshall, and working in the parish there. And I loved it. I didn't want to change that for the world. I loved the teaching, classroom teaching. Old-fashioned kind, you know, where priests wore these big, intimidating black cassocks and you'd walk in and all the kids would say, oh. But I sure liked that, and I wanted to continue. So when the volunteer letter came, I threw it away because I didn't want to volunteer. Bishop came out for confirmations and he said, say, Greg, that letter. Well, you know, Bishop, it said volunteer, and I really don't want to volunteer. I like doing what I'm doing. I want to do it the rest of my life. But so I didn't respond. Well, he said, you know, you're a young priest. You're supposed to respond to the letter from the bishop. Besides, what makes you think you're going to be chosen? Because there's so many people volunteering. But you should respond. Oh, gee, so I was unembarrassed and quick, whatever you say. But I should have said in the first place. May of '63. You have been chosen. Wonderful letter. Beautiful. Something to save and show your mother every once in a while. I was the only one that wrote. Nobody else wrote. Now what? Well, no preparation for mission. I did come down and got 3 months of study of language and culture in a Maryknoll school up in Huehuetenango, where they prepared their people, their final step for coming into the country. A very good little school, but only 3 months. But still, it's going to be okay. You didn't have to have the language or anything. You come down here and follow this priest around that wanted to be, and then you could go home and do what you wanted to do anyway. Well, I got here, and that priest had been called home because he was a member of the Minnesota National Guard as chaplain, and his division was going to Vietnam, so he had to go. So I ended up the only foreigner here for a year. Couldn't speak to the people because I couldn't understand the language. Couldn't understand what they were saying because I couldn't understand the language. And so you walk around like a dumbbell and smiling and saying "see" a lot. That's about all. Mass was in Latin at that time, thank God. We had it back to the people. And we were all dealing with the language no one of us understood any. And then when I'd have to turn around and read the scriptures in vernacular, I couldn't do that. Well, there was a woman, we didn't have many people coming to church then, but there was one, a woman named Mirtala Celada. And she could read. Her father was manager of a plantation outside, and as a young woman, she was helping the little kids learn a little Spanish. And so she'd say to me, you know, Father, let me read that, please. So, I'd sit down and listen hard to try and understand. I didn't realize it, but some years after that, a group of people came to me and said, Father, we were just thinking about those first years when you were here, you know, and Mirtala had to read the scriptures in the vernacular because you couldn't do that. But all of us were thinking at that time, here this guy comes from the richest, most powerful, most dynamic nation known to humankind. And he's dumb, he can't even read. Well, what was happening then is slowly but surely, and I was the stranger, I was the outsider, so there are some places in town you didn't go into. You know, they'd spit on you and shout things. Shouting, there's no problem because I didn't understand what they were saying anyway. Just wave and smile. But some of the places were not good, and it just wasn't, you stayed away, that's all. But by far, the people were very patient, very kind, and very helpful. And so I've always did, as I mentioned earlier, I really have felt indebted. Because they could have put me on tarred and feathered me and put me on a rail and got me out of town. You know? They had all the right in the world to. But then their teaching and my total and complete ignorance and the need to have somebody would patiently show me and what to do has been really a blessing. Really a blessing. And so all of that time, a mutual trust was growing. And I didn't realize it then, of course. But the trust, it had to be mutual. The trust that they had in me because I was too dumb to know anything, and so they had to teach me. And so they felt, good, we'll take care of him. He needs it. And then my trust in them because I was so grateful for them being patient and helping me. And the different ways that those things that were brought home, today they've become stories. But they're not stories for the sake of stories. These are things that have happened, and over the years, thinking about them, reflecting about them, and talking about them, as any oral tradition will do, they'll kind of go into a story form, so it's easier to relate and easier to remember. But there's always the lesson there that is the key to the reason for the story and how the story then can make a positive impact. And again, it's that business of what you had to do to be of value to the people. And that was brought home so firmly by a grand old fellow from town, a fellow named Maximiliano Campa. He was a very regal somebody, tall for a Cachiquel Indian person. Actually, Margarito here's his grandfather. And the two young fellows in the office over there, Mario and Minor, their great-grandfather. Although Max, as we all knew him, was one of these special kind of regal people of the wisdom part of the community. And he, like I mentioned, he was tall, and he liked to wear the traditional clothes of the Cachiquel community he originally came from, which is across the lake, a place called San Andres at the back, which was in a homespun pullover shirt, and then the homespun trousers, with the long trousers, with a big red sash, and impressive clothing, impressive. And then the big sombrero because he was tall, and big sandaled feet. And he just had that stride. You just knew if he wasn't a king, somebody missed, and he should be. And he came to me one day, I was standing around up in front of church, and he said, Padre, what'd you come here for? Geez, don't knock, I think I'd like to serve the people. Looked for a minute and then walked away. Well, wasn't too long after that he came again. He said, Padre, what'd you come here for? I'm wondering, that's strange. Pastor. But then, well, Don Max, I think I'd like to serve the people. Oh. And again, he turned and walked away. Well, I didn't know what was happening, but okay, so sometime after that, I don't have the exact distance between these episodes in time. But he came again and he said to me one more time, "Hey, Padre, what'd you come here for?" I said, "Geez, Don Max, we've been through this a couple of times." So I don't know if I'm not answering right. I know my Spanish is not that good, but maybe, I think, Don Max, I'd like to serve the people. He left me, you know, Padre, I think you would. Now, if you want to serve my people, you have to learn something and never ever forget it. You have to learn to be patient with yourself and patient with my people. Learn that and remember it. Well, you know, I pretty well was dumbfounded, you know. I said, wow. And when he walked away this time, you know, I was trying to say thank you, but didn't really realize or understand. And my day during those years, we'd have Mass in Latin again at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then I'd go out and walk around town. I didn't know what else to do, just to look and see and whatever. And there wasn't much of a town at that time. There were only 7,000 people, not 20. And there weren't streets, there were paths. There was no lights, electricity, the water was not pumped from the lake. So you can imagine, it was just all the houses were made out of corn stalks and living in the middle of coffee fields. And I'd just walk around. And I noticed that almost every day Don Max would fall in step alongside me. And so doing, he'd tell me things. And this family that lives over in this CTO, such and such, and their names, and they came from, and their work, their children, all these kinds of things, and whatever. And he was just teaching, talking about customs and traditions. And I always, you know, I didn't pay too much attention to it other than I found it interesting, you know, as such. And what he was hammering home to me was so terribly important. And slowly but surely, that there was some building up of understanding and appreciation. Then one day, his grandson, Jorge Mucia, came from his home was about a block and a half up the street. And he said, say, "Padre, your friend Don Max wants to see you." Oh, hi. So I went up, and there he was sitting on a small chair in the middle of this large room. And he had the sombrero turned over in front of him. And he was thumbing kernels of corn from near into the sombrero. And I can remember the first impression I had when he came into the door was he was a very tall fellow, and the chair was only about this high. That was most of the chairs in the homes. And he looked like an upside-down question mark. And, you know, not a very good thing to be thinking of. And then with his head, he kind of motioned me over to sit in front of him against the wall on a bench that was there. And I did that. And he just kept thumbing, one at a time. Said nothing, didn't recognize my presence other than the nod. And I thought, well, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I didn't understand something. I should let the poor man alone and get out of here. So I was about to say something while thanking him and then leaving when he said, "Hey, Padre," he said, "you're my friend, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah, I'm your friend." And he said, "Would you give me $50? Yeah, he said, "Would you give me $50? I said, "Geez, Max, what do you want $50 for?" Well, he said, "I'm going to die soon. In our culture, when an aged person dies, it's a fiesta because that person's going to go home to rest. And so at the wake, at the vigil for the night before burial, we have to have some coffee, we have to have some sugar, we have to have some bread, and we also have to have a little aguardiente because every once in a while there's somebody who likes to have a little drink." And he said, "You know, that all costs money, and I can't ask my kids because they don't have any money. I can't borrow it from you because I'm going to die and I can't pay it. So would you give it to me?" Well, as I got into the business of the doctors and medicine and hospitals, and he just waited very patiently, and he said, "Padre, you're my friend, aren't you?" So here, here's a $50. Sure, glad to give you $50. Well, again, was a time after that, again, that part I don't remember on these incidences. I just remember those moments. Jorge came to me, that grandson. He said, "Say, Padre, your friend Don Max would like to have that blessing you give people who are going to die." So, holy smokes, what the heaven's name is this? So I went up, and there he was lying on the bedroom floor, and the blanket was up to his chin. And he watched me with his eyes when I came to the door, and looking straight at the ceiling, he said, "Hey, Padre, would you give me that blessing you give people who are going to die?" So there I am shocked, and I go into the whole doctor, medicine, hospital thing again, and he waited patiently. When I was all done with the harangue, he said, "Say, Padre, that blessing." So I had to kneel to anoint his forehead with holy oil, and I did that. And then when he was finished, when I was finished, he took his hand out from the blessing, from under the blanket, and he said, "Say, Padre, would you wait there a minute? I want to bless you." So he put his hand on my head, and again, still looking at the ceiling, he said, "Creator God, bless this young man. Teach him to be patient with himself and patient with my people." He left his hand on my head for a moment. They took it away and put it back under the blanket. He said, "You can go now." And so I stood up, and you can well imagine you're in shock, and then left. And about halfway back to the parish, I heard the running feet coming up behind me. It was Jorge. And before I even turned, he said, "Padre, Padre, your friend Don Max just died." It was dark, and I thank God for that, because you can imagine. And it was Christmas Eve. It was Christmas Eve. And so Christmas, every year, is a special time of memories. And remembering a great person, great human being, who blessed me in so many ways. And taught me things as other people had taught, but taught in ways that that's the way it would happen. And I remember the teaching, but then over the years it's taken on these story forms, and that helps me remember even better. And when I reflect on them, and I do, it still brings it more home to me. And these other kinds of teachings in this whole encomienda system that we see in the plantations, and the relationship between the rich and the powerful and the poor, it was obvious that our people, were struggling with hunger. And in those early years, I remember John F. Kennedy had gotten together with Hubert Humphrey, a senator from our state, and when Humphrey was on Congress, and they put together a Food for Peace program. What had happened was Kennedy, his last year on Congress before being elected president, was with the NASA Commission. And he made the statement, "Within a decade, we'll be walking on the moon. In less than 10 years, Armstrong took that small step for humankind, small step for a person, huge step for humankind." But then in 1960, Kennedy said, "Within a decade, we'll eliminate hunger from the world." Well, that didn't work out too well. And today, hunger is worse than it was then. But when that pursuit of that goal, Kennedy and Humphrey, and then of course the others, put together this Food for Peace program. And what they were doing is they had all this good American food in powder form or flour form in sacks. And there was cornmeal, soy meal, and powdered milk in flour form, 100-pound bags, and we'd get it through USAID and Caritas Guatemala, Catholic Belief Services. Same thing with enriched white flour, and then cases of vegetable oil. And then we get so much each month, depending upon the number of people you're going to be able to feed. And we knew fully well that our people don't work with that type of flour, so we turned the soy and powdered milk and cornmeal mixture into a very rich breakfast drink, like a cream of wheat with kick that you could drink. Then we put in a little bit of sugar and cinnamon, And kids are gonna drink anything with sugar and cinnamon. And so we would go around town and turn the flour into bread with the oil. Fell up the street here, Hirao Jacinto, had a nice big burro. We put a pack saddle on and 2 cream cans full of that breakfast drink and a big basket of bread. He'd stop at a corner, and the mothers would all come out with their containers and get this food for their children. Oh, I was proud of that program. You're hungry, we'll feed you. You betcha. And we'll handle this neat and clean. I took pictures, and I showed people pictures that would come to visit, even if they didn't want to see them. They got to see the pictures. And I'd tell them about how we're feeding the poor people and all of this. Man, that was up. One day before class, our head of our auxiliary teachers, Ricardo Aquac, came and he said, "Hey, Padre, something happened at home today you're not going to believe." "Oh, yeah?" He said, "My wife, Weecha, came to me and she said, 'Say, Ricardo, did you notice anything different about the tortillas today?' And I said, 'You know, Weecha, you always make good tortillas. But today, it was different. They tasted better.' And she said, 'Yes, they were. It's the first time we've ever had tortillas made from corn we raised on our own land.'" I said, "Padre, you're not going to believe it, but it's true." And, you know, you try to be gracious. Say, "Oh, thank you for telling me all this. I didn't believe that. Of course, corn, come on." And tortillas are tortillas. You know, if you don't have avocado with them, what are you going to do with a tortilla? And so I just didn't catch on. And he knew that. So the next day, he got another great mentor, Marcos Tun. Dr. Rafael Tun's dad, by the way, was one of the key people to teaching us. Only Marcos knew how to deal with gringos. You know, don't try to be subtle. They're not going to catch on. You just go right down the line, the head of the center of the road, and fast. So he came when Ricardo was with him, and they had another friend. I never have been able to remember that person's name. I don't remember who it was. But the 3 of them came, and Marcos was talking. He said, "Hey, Padre, thanks for your food. It's good. But don't give us your food. Help us buy land so we can produce our own food." And I talked about getting hit with a ton of brick. I should have known that. You know, being able to raise, process, produce, process, and prepare your own food as a culture, and then eat it when you want to, serve it and eat it the way you want to, and when. We take that for granted when we're going to go out to eat. It's going to be a little formal occasion. Let's celebrate their folks' wedding anniversary or some such thing. So the first thing you ask, well, what kind of food would you like to eat? What would you like to? There's a new Chinese place out on 494. It's just great. Would you like to go out there? Or if, you know, down in West 7th, there's the Glockenspiel, and they do ham hocks and sauerkraut like nobody else. The best German food in the world. So we even identify food by the culture. And I did that. I should have known, but didn't.